Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration. Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders. We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy to achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. Episode 140 of the podcast, and our topic is doing the work. That's right, doing the work in leadership. Taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. Where does mental health factor in? Compassion, all of it. That is what we're talking about today with our guest, Dennis Trapani. He's the University of Wyoming's Associate Athletic Director of Creative Services. He was also the summit chairperson at the recent Sports Video Group's College Summit. This annual event is fantastic, where folks get together who have common interests in equipment, doing great work, as well as having panels like this one that Dennis spearheaded. It was called Managing Your Team and Yourself, Mental Health in Today's Media Production Age. Again, Dennis organized this, and I was on the panel with him. It was hosted by Christian Hernandez of the Sports Video Group, and we were lucky to be joined by Dr. Kenza Gunter. She was amazing. The conversation was so rich, and hopefully those in attendance got a lot of use and insights from the conversation. Dennis, today we will follow up and talk more about the topic of mental health, not just in sports production, but in totality, as well as leadership. And what does it look like? What does it feel like? Finding your true passion. Dennis and I will also have some fun. We'll talk about inside the NBA and what is it going to be like going from TNT to ESPN. We'll talk about the first time Dennis directed a game and what that feeling was. There's so much that we go over, including we talk about his podcast called the Sports Prod Pod. You get it, right? Production. This is a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad you're here. It begins now with Dennis Trapani. Dennis, this is great to have you. You and I were on a panel just last week at the SVG College Summit 2025 talking about mental health, creating boundaries in a stressful profession. So here's what I always say, Dennis. Why do we have our guests on? I'm going to say it right in front of you. Sometimes I'll say it in the intro, but I'm going to say it to you, right to you. We have you on because I was very impressed with you. I was very impressed with the way you articulated and felt, the need to express why this is so important, why this is such an important topic. So let's start there, Dennis. We were talking about the demands in the production world, right? Which is universal to other professions, right? That the concepts we talked about can help anyone listening right now, whether they're in, the medical field or, for goodness sakes, in tech. It doesn't matter. These are universal principles. So when I throw that to you, what comes to mind? What did we talk about? I'm putting you on the spot that can be shared with these folks to help them. And then we'll drill down specifically to the world of sports content.
The one thing I mentioned is people are your biggest asset. Treat them as such. And I believe that because whether it's sports production or the medical field or any of these things, pick it, doesn't get done without people, right? My experience as a supervisor, as a leader, as a boss, whatever you want to call it, is that you have to know your people. You have to know what their breaking points are. You have to know what their floor is. You have to know what their ceiling is, right? And that you don't have a successful, well-oiled machine without people and without knowing those people.
And it takes time to know those people. And we talk about this,
Yeah.
Dennis, all the time on the podcast, that investment in time to know people. You can't do that superficially. You can't just say, hey, how's it going? And keep walking. You have to invest that time. And the argument is a lot of leaders, managers, bosses, and we'll get to that in a minute, the label that is proper for this, say, I don't have that time. You and I disagree with that. Explain why that time is so important. Take us to the next level and what it looks like to invest in your people.
Yeah, you have to make the time. And as you know from working in the sports world, yes, it's a lot of hours. It's a lot of there's a lot of crunch time. There's a lot of deadlines. You're working 40 hours a week and then you're working games on nights and weekends on top of it. What I've kind of found works best is to organically have those moments in the middle of all that craziness. Um, you're working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, sometimes more, as you know, it's not, once you dedicate yourself to trying to follow that model, it's not hard to find those little 5, 10, 20, 30-second conversations in amongst the chaos where you can kind of bond with somebody and really get to know somebody. I've said many times the group I have now might be my favorite group I've ever had. Um, and that's nothing against any of the other people that have ever worked for me in the past, because they're all great. But the group I have now has just been very, very receptive to that, and they want to talk and they want to get to know you, and um, that helps me because I'm able to see when they're having a bad day. I'm able to see when they're having a good day. I'm able to see when, hey, like maybe this is a good time. Maybe let's push a little bit further here. Let's try something new. Let's try to innovate a little bit. But yeah, I've found it to be very organic once I made that decision to kind of invest in my staff that way.
It takes self-awareness to do exactly what you just said, right? So they are opening up to you because you're creating an open avenue for them to do so. So how
Mhm.
much pride do you take in your own personal self-awareness? Meaning you're stressed. You have a job, a high pressure job at a major university, and you have people pulling at you from, your bosses, equal stakeholders, and those that look to you for leadership. So, how do you maintain an open minded approach, a growth mindset, so people can feel comfortable coming to you? How do you do it every day?
Well, the first thing that I always tell my staff is I don't have all the answers. I may be the one with the big long title on my business card, but that doesn't mean I have the answer to everything. If we're in a staff meeting and I'm going on about something and I have an idea, if you guys think I'm wrong or you think there's a better way or you think there's a more efficient way to do something, maybe a work smarter not harder situation, please interrupt me. Like, obviously, do it. Let's do it respectfully. We're in a staff meeting, but interrupt me and say, "Hey, like, have you thought about it this way?" And everything kind of extends from that. Is I tell them all the time, if you need something, do not be afraid to tell me. If you're feeling a certain way, for having a bad day, if you're overworked, if you're stressed about a specific project, if you don't think you're going to hit a deadline, tell me on the front end, because then that way I can help you. If you tell me 4 hours before something's due that, hey, I don't think I'm going to get this done, that's a lot harder for me to help you get through that situation than if you had told me 5 days ago. So that's kind of my biggest thing. And I mean, that kind of comes from my upbringing, you know. I grew up in an Italian family. Obviously, my name ends in a vowel, as you much understand.
Yes, I
And
do.
that was always, we were always very open about how we're feeling and how things were going in my family growing up. And my parents did a great job with that. Um, and I've kind of taken that into mentoring my younger staff members. Is, I'm not going to get mad at you if you tell me you're unsure of something. I would rather you ask me, because that way I can help you learn, just as someone once helped me learn.
That's really interesting. And Dennis, you bring up so much there. So let's look at this. So people, like I said, towards the beginning of our conversation today, which is that there's so many people listening from different industries that listen to the podcast, and then those from our industry per se, right? And how can this be useful? Look at the disruption that's going on. Look at the influence of AI. Look at the college sports world has been turned upside down. Conference realignment, NIL, can I go on and on? Budget allocation, everything is changing, right? And then the political world is infiltrating the college space, right? There's just, I could keep going, I'm not going to. People get the picture. So this conversation that we're having and the one we had at SVG in Atlanta a few weeks ago is so important. So let's look at this. How do you settle the waters? How do you, because they're your staff, equal stakeholders, senior leaders at Wyoming are also thinking about this. What have you seen in the college space? It doesn't have to be specific to Wyoming, but that's your day to day. but I know you're well connected. How are people, how are you and others working to settle and take a deep breath, per se, to make sure you could still get your job done at a high level and keep everyone together?
One thing that I have, as I've gone through my own personal growth, over the last however many years, you know, when I was younger, I was really, really high strung, and I freely admit that to anyone that will listen to me. As I think a lot of young people are in this business. Sometimes you want to impress people. You've gotten your foot in the door, and you want to make sure your foot stays in the door. Um, but what I've learned is don't borrow trouble is a great saying that an old boss, Kevin McKinney, of mine, and he's more than a boss. He's a mentor. He's like a second dad to me. He always used to tell me, "Don't borrow trouble." If I would get worked up at what might happen, right? Like what's the worst case scenario here? Sometimes I would go straight to that. But as I've grown and matured and um, I've learned more about myself and how I handle that. When I see a young person in the field that reminds me of myself when I was 22, 23, 24, I'm able to say to them, "Hey, calm down. I know it's crazy. I know this is an insane atmosphere in this business right now, but let's just see where it goes. Kind of ride the wave, so to speak. Don't automatically go to worst case scenario, and don't go to best case scenario, because 9 times out of 10, the result's going to lie in the middle somewhere there."
You said this when we were in person, and you said it here today, and I'm going to drill down on it. I want to know if you have, was there an inflection point? You said, when I was younger, I was high strung. And if you ask anyone who knows me, they would say the same thing. Me too.
Mhm.
You and I have been through I was the same way. I was very intense at certain times, and didn't regulate my emotions as best as I could. Right
Yep.
now, looking back, now I'm, much older. But my point is, but I'm going to ask you because you're the guest, right? So my question to you, was there a certain, I don't want to say breaking point, but a
Mhm.
catalyst moment that you said, all right, I've got to start investing in myself as a pro, as a leader in the industry, and I need to take my career in a different direction in order to grow? What was that moment? Was there one, or was it a series of moments, Dennis?
I think it was more a series of moments. It was a series of, and it was nothing specific to Wyoming or College of Charleston or West Point, the places I've worked within the college space. It was nothing specific to any of those places either. It was more I'm sitting there at 1 or 1:30 in the morning, and I'm still in the office, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? Like this is supposed to be fun. Right? And this isn't fun. I will say, we kind of joked about COVID a little bit, as we can maybe look back on that now at this point and laugh about some of the things that happened. One of the great things to come out of COVID is I realized, and I think my bosses at Wyoming realized, well, we don't need to be in the office all the time. What's important about that is 5 o'clock comes, and even if I've got hours of game prep ahead of me, or hours of editing, or whatever it might be, I can bring it home and do it. And I can sit here and I can throw the Yankees on, or I can throw the Rangers on, or I'll have my dog laying at my feet, or I'll make dinner and I'll bring it up to the home office and eat while I'm working. It's little things like that, I'm still working, but I don't mind as much pouring through game notes and cutting player packages right now, because I'm in my home. I'm comfortable. I'm in my safe place, if you will, I guess. Um, and that's been a massive thing, that I've learned, is that you have to. And I think I said this on the panel. Sometimes when you're young in this business, your identity becomes your job, right? And you are more than that. You're so much more than that. And anytime you can remind yourself of that, I think that's a good thing.
I agree. That's valuable advice right there, Dennis. And the way you articulated that, people can identify with that. Being at home is an option now, a viable
Yeah.
option. And it perhaps was before COVID, but we weren't conditioned, right? We needed
Hmm.
that gigantic event to happen to say, hey, we can do this and still be as productive. And you don't want
Yeah.
a global pandemic to trigger that, but at least we could look back and say there was some good to come of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just referenced the Yankees and the Rangers. Don't think we missed that, my friend. A Poughkeepsie, New York native.
hmm
So tell us, when you first were an undergrad and starting to frame what you wanted to do in life, why did you gravitate towards sports production?
Well, I actually, I'll be perfectly honest, I fell into the production side of it completely by accident. Um, I originally went to school. I went to Gannon University in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I originally went to be an athletic trainer. And so I had a writing class, just an elective writing class, and I had written a paper. I don't remember if it was about the Yankees or the Rangers or something. It was like a sports writing thing. And the teacher pulled me aside after and said, you're pretty good at this. You should think about sports as a career. And I had never considered that sports could be a career. So I started trying different things. I got involved with the media relations office. I got involved with the campus radio station, and I ended up calling basketball games on the radio and baseball and softball and on all that stuff. And so I wanted to be a play-by-play guy by the time I graduated. Well, I get to my first job. I end up moving back to New York to work at West Point, and I'm calling games, but part of the job was doing video, was sometimes directing a web stream, was sometimes um, cutting features, shooting highlights. And I started to think to myself, well, I really like this video part more than I like the having the microphone strapped to my head. And so I spent 2 years there, and then I got a job at the College of Charleston down in South Carolina. And I was there a couple years, and we were doing web streams and we were doing all these other things. And one day my boss, Josh Bryson, comes in and he says to me, he goes, "Hey, do you want a TV truck?" And I laughed at him, but I was like, "Yeah, that sounds fun." And I'm like, "There's no way," right? He literally goes and we had an ESPN3 deal before the rest of the Southern Conference did. We got a Sprinter van and we put a TriCaster and a 3-play and an audio board in it and got some really basic cameras, and we built a TV truck. And
Great.
I got to tell you, the first time I sat down at that switcher, I fell in love. And I was probably 25 at the time, 26. And I just said, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I don't want to do anything else. And so I had a great mentor in Charleston, Steve Cooney, and we remain friends to this day. Steve is from Toronto, worked for Sportsnet and CBC for ages, both on air and in production. He's worked like 4 or 5 Olympics. And I don't know why, but he just decided that this kid from New York, I'm going to teach him everything that I know. And, I just, like I said, I fell completely head over heels in love with live sports production.
I love those choice of words, and I love that story. That just makes my day.
hmm
You sat in front of that switcher and you fell in love. Listen, everybody.
Yep.
So, Dennis, we have, I teach at NYU. I think I told you that the other day when we
Yep.
were on the panel. And I talk to college seniors all the time. This past semester, I had freshmen and seniors, of course. And so I get the thoughts of that generation. And it's just so wonderful to listen to them and watch their excitement towards certain
Yeah.
things that we talk about. And that's what I want for them and my son, for goodness sakes, and people that I know and love, which is to have that moment when you sat down. I mean, look at that. You were going to be an athletic trainer, and then you go this way and you go that way. You have somebody who wants to give you a truck, for goodness sakes. That's
Yeah.
such a great story. How do you share that with your staff, right? And people that you work with when you see that perhaps they're not loving what they're doing? Do you take
hmm
keen interest in that and move them maybe over to audio or something where you probably work really hard to help them find that moment that you had? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. We are a bit of an otters, if that's the word. I guess it's not,
We're
but
using it today. It is now.
yeah. We're an odd situation at Wyoming. We don't have a J school.
Got it.
And so the students that we get really want to be there. Um, and yes, once in a while you find somebody that they'll try it for a semester and you can tell. And, they'll come to me or I'll pull them aside and the conversation will be, hey, this isn't what you want to do. And that's okay. That's totally okay. That's why we do internships. That's why we do work study. That's why we do that stuff when we're that age, because finding out what you don't love is just as important as finding out what you love. And, but a lot of the kids, they come and seek us out. I can tell you our best camera guy right now, our best student camera operator is an engineering major. And it was, again, an accident. We were short one day. I needed to put him on a handheld for basketball. And I basically said, just keep the ball in frame. That's all I'm worried about. Just get the shot. I'm not worried about the bench shots or any of this other detail stuff. And the kid killed it. And he came in after, and you could see the light bulb had gone off and he was beaming. We've got another student that sat down, had never run replay once in his life, sat down at our Mira, and now he's our lead replay operator. And I mean lead, like before the freelancers. He'll be our first choice to run replay because he's gotten that good at it. So wow. That's my favorite part. Now, don't get me wrong. I love working on pro crews with full professionals where everyone else has a ton of experience and you're worried about your job. But there is something awesome about working with students, and you won't even really notice it until like maybe you call for a replay sequence and it goes exactly the way it's supposed to. And you turn around and you look at that kid and they're beaming like, and you just know, okay, it just clicked. Like they just had the moment. That's so cool. Like right in the middle of this game, they had the moment.
The moment that you had when you sat down in front of that switcher.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. You have your own podcast called the Sports Prod Pod. Say that 10 times quickly, where you and your bud analyze different, variations of broadcast. But let's not get too technical, but let's have some fun with this. You told me before we hit record today that you two or three, however many people you have on, analyzed an old Red Sox broadcast. I love that. I want to know what year that was from, and just tell people why that must have been very interesting and entertaining for those listening.
Yeah. So, it's the Sports Prod Pod. I do it with my two good buddies, Alex Souza, who is the head of video at Coastal Carolina, and Nick Case, who was the head of video at Charleston Southern, who has now since transitioned into the freelance world. We all became friends when I was at the College of Charleston. Nick one day texts our group chat and says, "Hey, look at this old Red Sox game I found on YouTube." And I right off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you if it was the 60s or the 70s, but it was in that area. It was in color, so maybe that helps. I don't know.
Probably the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah. We were just watching it on our own. And I think Alex said, like, "Hey, let's do a podcast on this. Like, let's just skim through it while we're doing the podcast, and we can talk about things that we noticed and things that have changed and things that have gotten better." So now let's call it 1975, right?
They were in the World Series against the Reds. Was it a World Series game against the Reds?
It might have been. It actually might have been. But it was like local Boston TV doing it. And what struck me that I mentioned is, man, this really doesn't look all that different than if I turned Sunday Night Baseball on a couple nights ago. It really doesn't. And what struck me about that is, hey, like the people that started doing this way back when had a clue, because we're still shooting baseball that way. And so that's the kind of things we talk about. It's basically a big nerd fest because I'm a nerd about TV production and they are too. And we just find things like that so interesting.
Yes, it is interesting. All right, before we get to all-star moments, I want to revisit. I want to go back to the panel because we started with, the boundaries, mental health, managing expectations, right, within the world that you're working in day to day. And then we got to know you. And now let's close a little bit with that. So, Dennis, with all of your experience and uniting your team to innovate, you have to be able to understand each other, right? And take advantage of everyone's individual talents and by connection, which you talked about earlier. So tell me that right there. So you've been all over, right? You've been at all those schools and you've seen different people and different ways and cultures in which to get their job done. Talk about innovation and why it's important, people's mental health, connection, culture, to be able to innovate as a college content/production unit.
Well, I think the biggest thing off the top of my head is that that's what we all enjoy, right? We all enjoy whether you're doing live production or creative content. We love making cool stuff. And that's a very, very rudimentary way of saying that. But it's the truth. That's the enjoyment that you derive from it, right? Is wow, I did that, or wow, that was really enjoyable, or man, I'm really proud of myself that that show went that way, or that this video came out that way. Um, you don't get that if people are miserable. I say all the time, we may not be the best video department in America. We may not put out the best content. We may not put on the best live shows, but this is supposed to be fun, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to laugh. We're going to make jokes. We're going to pick on each other in a positive, loving way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um we're gonna enjoy being here, and that is, if somebody's depressed, if somebody's overworked, if somebody's burnt out, they can't enjoy it to the fullest.
And that's why we had that wonderful discussion on the
Yep.
SVG panel. What advice would you give a leader in the space, or just leave it at leader? What advice would you give a leader to take care of their group to avoid burnout? Let's just stay right there with that and put a sentence ender right there: to avoid burnout.
You have to know them. And I'm not saying you have to be their best friend in the whole world, because at the end of the day, yes, you're their boss. And I kind of hate that word. But you're their supervisor. And their performance reflects back on you, and the department as a whole, not only video, but the athletic department as a whole. So you have to have that boundary, if you will, of, hey, let's have the respect factor here, and let's work together, but let's make it respectful. But I think the biggest thing is you have to know them at least a little bit, and that it can be something as simple as what their favorite food is. And on a Friday, maybe you order out lunch for everybody and you get them their favorite food, or know what their favorite sports team is. And Charlie Bramhall on my staff, he's from Boston, I'm from New York, and as you know, that's oil and water, right? Especially Red Sox fans and Yankees fans. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'll say to him, hey, the Yanks are playing the Sox tonight. Like, let's go watch it somewhere. It's like I said before, knowing their ceiling and knowing their floor, and knowing that fluctuates every single day. Just take to kind of boil it down to one sentence. Take the time to care.
Nicely done, Dennis. Let's go to all-star moments. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
This is first thought, best thought.
Okay.
You're in the hot seat. Here we go. We will get to all-star moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. Favorite NFL team?
The San Francisco 49ers.
Why did you hit me with that? That's what I grew up. I'm a third generation Niner fan. Explain that.
My dad had a disdain, let's just say, for Joe Montana. And as my mother likes to tell the story, one day I got a really, really devilish grin on my face and announced to the house that I was going to root for the 49ers. And 37 years later, it's stuck.
Why did he not like Joe Montana?
He's a diehard Giants fan.
I understand why he didn't like
And
Joe
so,
Montana.
yeah,
All right, you said the Yankees. Do I assume that your favorite team is your native New York Yankees?
yes, yep. Diehard,
Okay,
born and bred. My dad was from the Bronx. I didn't have a choice.
Otani or Judge?
I'm gonna get killed for this, Judge. I can't go against my guy.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so prior to coming on, and you knew I was going to ask you about this, inside the NBA, the popular TNT show with Charles, Ernie, Shaq, and Kenny is going to ESPN. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that? What will happen with that show? Will it be as good? What's going to happen?
It will be as good as they allow it to be. I think if they maintain the same format, they let the guys be themselves. Because really, it's not the NBA that makes that show. It's those four guys. That's the beauty of that show. Um, I think it's really cool that the Turner Group down in Atlanta is still going to produce it out of their facility.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think as long as they let it be what it is, it's still going to be awesome. For my perspective, it's the best sports show on TV.
I hope I agree. It has a flow, a natural
Hmm.
flow, and but here's what happens, and this happens in baseball, corporate, football, whatever, major TV networks. The new network feels compelled to put their stamp on it, to do
Hmm.
something with it. Now, I have no idea what ESPN is going to do, but to your point, sometimes it's good to just let it exist as it does, right? There's a reason it's been on so long and been so successful and is only gaining momentum because of the marquee players and the way the NBA markets itself. It's just such a on top of mind sport, you know?
I think in our business we have a tendency to want to reinvent the wheel, and sometimes that's a really good thing. Uh, but sometimes it's not, and sometimes you need to sit back and go, "Hey, the wheel works pretty good. Let's not fix it if it's not broken."
And then I was just going to get into the firing of the coach of the Knicks because I assume the Knicks are your team.
Poor Tibbs. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I'm gonna wait and see who they bring in. But I'm just getting over losing to the Pacers. We'll see who they bring in. I like Tibbs. I thought he was a great coach. But you know what? They've been so bad for most of my life that I'm just kind of enjoying this right now. Like they haven't been this good in a long time. So I'm
Yeah, they
kind
were
of
great.
kind of tempering myself a little bit.
All right, you ready? Last one. Describe
Okay.
yourself as a leader in one sentence, Dennis.
Wow. I try my best. That's how I'm gonna put it. I try my best. Um, and I'm not perfect, and sometimes I fail, but I would like to think I succeed more often than I fail.
That was a really good answer.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've enjoyed this visit very much. This has been really, really enjoyable, and I think our viewers and listeners got a lot out of it. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And we thank Dennis very much for being on the show. In case you're wondering, we taped this conversation before that major ruling came down affecting college athletic departments in Division 1 where they are now able to pay their athletes. Again, we taped the conversation just a few days prior to that ruling. So now let's get to the takeaways from the conversation you just heard from Dennis. Number 1, don't borrow trouble. I thought there was a lot of wisdom. Dennis was given that advice, and I'm bringing it back to our takeaways this week. Don't worry about what will happen. Just stay on course. Take care of yourself and take care of others, and don't worry about the what ifs. Number 2, people are our biggest assets. Treat them as such. Tell them, tell people. You heard Dennis and I talking about that. Let them know. Be kind, be inclusive, make those connections. Don't just have those types of sentiments be words on a wall. And number 3, humility, the value of humility. You heard Dennis. He said, quote, I don't have all the answers. And he wants people to challenge him in appropriate settings, right? Not in a staff meeting. You heard Dennis. But when it's appropriate, let's all come together and realize there are subject matter experts. Let's take advantage of that and not always have to be right, but be collaborative. A wonderful conversation. Hope you agreed. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. If you like the podcast, share it, write some comments, let us know how you feel. Take care. Thank you. Keep the line moving, moves on, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwhal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.